Welcome to a Pulp event podcast, brought to you by the Pulpnet, your link to the online world of the pulp magazines, since 1996, online at thepulp.net. In this Pulp event podcast, Pulpcon, guest of honor David Saunders talks about his father, pulp artist Norman Saunders. It was recorded in 2007 at Pulpcon 36 in Dayton, Ohio.
My dad was Norman Saunders, who was a lot of fun, and if he were here now, he'd be 100 years old. It's pretty amazing. So when I was born, I was born in 54, and he would say, well, I was born in 1907, and it really sounded old. You could barely find pennies from 1907 at that time. And it seemed like, way before Charlie Chaplin and all that stuff, and I was like, he actually helped out in the projection of the Birth of a Nation in his town when he was a kid. But anyway, he's a really great guy, and I'm really glad to be here with all you guys. So I brought slides to give you an idea of who he was, and also what his collection was that he had afterwards. A lot of people ask me about what paintings we left with. So let's get started.
So is this called digital and analog?
I'd say in one word, what was Norman Saunders? I'd say he was irreverent. This is his high school photo of his graduation at high school. And it's so long ago, and he was so old, you guys only got to meet him when he was 75 or something. But he is the guy in the screwball in the center with the policeman outfit on, his hat on sideways. And I actually know a couple of the other people in the photograph, and they just said he was just a true character. He was really legendary in that little town of, this I think was Badger, Minnesota, where he graduated high school. Anyway, he took a nice correspondence course, and he worked his way down to Minneapolis eventually, and walked right into Fawcett Publications, which was making Captain Billy's Whiz Bang. And this is one of his really nice covers that he eventually did for Captain Billy. Fawcett put out Modern Mechanics. I'm sorry that our image is a little bit trimmed off. So this is one of the earliest paintings that Dad had kept, and this was another cover for Modern Mechanics, 1932, I think. And it's really beautiful. Minnesota freezes over completely all the time. So here's this concept of a motorcycle, like probably somebody could identify actually what the heart of that motorcycle is, but I can't. But it has a spiked wheel on the back and these like razor blade glides on the side, so that you could ride it on the ice and take some fellow that skating behind you at 100 miles an hour on the ice, and when you fall down from this guy, you don't get back up. And this is a little known thing. Dad did covers for other magazines while I was working at Fawcett's, and this is the Elks, like the club, the Elks Club. And they put out a monthly magazine up until the 60s, I think. And it's one of his early old covers. And he came to New York in 1934 and started selling them. Because out at Fawcett's, he worked and competed with the Rosens. And often he got better, more assignments, more frequently and stuff. And then the Rosens worked for Delacorte in New York. And so he just said, well, if I can beat Rosen at Fawcett's and Delacorte, I should just go to New York and keep working with the big league. And so he went to New York and just kept making really within 5 months, he was had all the work he could possibly do. He was very, very happy working as an illustrator in the city. And we don't have any of the original saucies, so these are just a representative sampling of the proof sheets that he kept. But we don't have the names. And I'm just speeding this along. So after that, you know, he, as you guys all know, he got lots and lots of really great covers before the war. And these are Ace publications. At the same time, he was studying with Harvey Dunn, who is basically the protege of Howard Pyle, and therefore N.C. Wyeth. And Harvey Dunn probably had the best school in America at that time for what they called commercial art at the time. And it was at the Grand Central School of Art. And he studied with him in the evenings for 4 years. And one of the assignments that Harvey Dunn gave him was to just take whatever magazine, like in those days it was Click, and I think Pick was another one. And it would be what in my lifetime was the Life magazine type magazine that just filled with fun photographs that looked like a kind of a newsreel thing, and just draw everything that's in there just to give yourself good practice. So these are beautiful sketches that Dad did, and you can see the little date on it, December 29th, 1941. And it was just, he would go from the front to the back of every magazine drawing like that. And he just gave himself an assignment that he would do it and for a solid year. And just as part of another exercise that he was doing. So these are just, if you found an old copy of the magazine from June 9th, 1941, those would be all the pictures that he saw, like either in the newspaper or in some sort of photojournal. And he thought that this was something that just really, really helped him a whole lot. So this is the kind of challenges that a really great artist like Harvey Dunn was passing on to other people to help them to just become, to get in contact with themselves and be more inspired and be able to just really do good work. So these have never been seen and stuff. But in 42, he was in the Army, and he was 36 years old, but they actually expanded the draft from, I think, 17 years old to 36 as part of the mobilization. And everybody was very happy to go, basically, as far as my father's experience was. And he was bored, and he was, because of his age, I guess, they made him a prison guard for Nazi prisoners from Europe. And he was working in a, destination unknown kind of prison camp, but it was in Louisiana. And he was a master sergeant, and there are all these great photos of him with a Thompson submachine gun and a master sergeant in a jacket, and he was Sergeant Saunders. And in the 1960s, it was a lot of fun watching combat with Sergeant Saunders. And he would tell everyone in the neighborhood that those were all stories of his exploits. And he got the photographs to prove it. And there's pictures of him standing there with all these Nazis, and it's pretty wild. But nevertheless, he thought it was kind of boring, and so he told him, he always said that he gave some guy in the Army a case of whiskey and to get transferred to something more interesting. And they trained him in camouflage painting, and he was shipped to China and worked with the Lido-Burma Road, going from Assam, India, through Burma, North Burma, which was still under siege by the Japanese, and then up into southwestern China, up to the Yangtze and Yunnan province, to bring gasoline and everything else they could possibly give to the Chinese army, because the Japanese had basically surrounded China's all of its ports, and so China was basically being starved and had been occupied by the Japanese, I think, for more than a decade at that point. So the Americans did this incredible thing of building the Burma Road, which originally only went to Burma, but they had to go basically through the Himalayas, I think, to get into China through another route coming through, basically using Calcutta as a port. Anyway, so he worked for 2.5 years in China and did the most incredible watercolors. And they didn't really need, once they defeated the Japanese in Burma and drove them south to Rangoon, there was no more need for bombing protection with camouflage. So this is a gasoline pipeline. Those would be cans in the back and the pipes and stuff. And they would just fill up, reservoirs to get the gas piped through the Himalayan mountains. And they didn't need the camouflage because there was no more bombing from the Japanese. So we had air superiority or whatever. And so his actual officers in charge, General Pike, who was in charge of the Lido Burma Road, Dad got a job working for Life magazine to do illustrations of the experience for the Army Corps of Engineers, and so they just said, go to it. And so he went to it, and so for the next 2.5 years, he was just a kind of a loose cannon with credentials, and to explore China and paint whatever he saw and record it. And these are just incredible pictures. That's Chiang Kai-shek up there instead of Buddha, and that's like some beautiful old temple that was just turned into I think it's a Red Cross sort of education thing for Chinese soldiers. So this is just, for my father, he considered these the most important artworks he ever did in his life. And it's kind of a funny thing in terms of all of his training up until this point. He had a lot of technical knowledge because of the work for modern mechanics, and he had great, action, adventure, and sexual stuff that he could bring into it. And from working with the Pulps, as a successful guy doing that, and but it just made him just go wild with the freedom of being able to really explore another country. His own father, oddly enough, fought with General Pershing in the Spanish-American War, and went to the Philippines and was shot by a Muslim sniper, and had opium for the rest of his life in order to survive the pain, supposedly. And so Dad had this incredible father to live up to. And so when he was in China, he was finally living up to these incredible fables of his own father, who eventually wound up as a trapper in northern Minnesota, where Dad was born. So for him to finally one-up his father this way was something, I think, spectacular for him emotionally. And he created these great things. Life magazine backed out of the story, and it was basically said that once the war got to a certain point, there was no longer really a propaganda machine at work trying to say how great China is, and we all have to stand behind China. And up until that point, it was a kind of a big propaganda issue to get Americans to okay the idea of sending so much of our, sort of like a Marshall Plan thing, just to China, when they themselves were a questionable nation and hadn't quite gotten their act together. And immediately after we pulled out, the communists, basically took over immediately, and the nation sort of collapsed in a sense in terms of its fledgling concepts of democracy. But anyway, Dad was having a ball at this point. He came back to America and tried to get his act back together again and rethink of himself as a illustrator. But he did actually have about 8 articles published of his China sketches in slick magazines during the war. So although the Life magazine one fell apart, he kept actually doing lots of illustrations for different human interest magazines, or whatever you call And it was fun because he actually illustrated them and wrote them also. So it's like Sergeant Saunders reporting from India or something like that. And it's kind of unique in the sense of most of the other pulp illustrators had nothing remotely like that in their experience, you know. And so the war brought interesting opportunities to my father, and he loved being able to write and invent his own stuff. So he came back, and everything was in jumble, obviously, trying to figure out where the publishing industry was going and how he would fit into it or something. And, it's just, everybody had to rethink their old career expectations. So he decided that he was going to really make I can't think of it. I've got shot these So he kept working at a lot of different houses, and everybody else was. The industry was in disarray, let's say, basically. But he found himself in a funny position because he's very practical and very good, and charged as much as everybody else, which was like $100 for a cover. And everybody still was thinking he was going to go from there into something more interesting. But so they were kind of willing to buy time. But in the meantime, he got a lot of assignments, hundreds and hundreds of assignments in 48, 49, 50, 51 from the pulps. And so he kind of was making much more money than he'd ever made before during the demise of the industry. He said that a lot of the publishers just felt that they can't pay anything. They're going out of business. They had complete leverage over the artists at that point, and they could actually lower the prices and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but all we pay is $90 or something." And so the artists would have to accept it, basically. And at that point, when my father came back from the war, they would say, "Well, at $90, we can get him. We'd rather have him than other people." And so he actually got way too much work, and so for Popular, he was just working endlessly, but at the same time, he was doing paperbacks and comic books at that same era, because the publishers were all the same guys trying to figure out, what's the right format that they can be making a fortune off of. This one should look familiar to Mark. This one I've never even seen. And if anyone has ever seen this, I'd love to know where it was published. That's a Star Western. So Popular did some, cost-cutting measures or something, and they were trying to tell all their tax people that we have X amount of money invested in properties like our printing presses and stuff, and they're devalued every year because they go through the usage and stuff, so we're devaluing our property and stuff. And they said, "Well, what is this property called, art that you've got?" And they said, "Oh, well, we've got rooms full of paintings. And so this is something we've invested in." And so they looked at it and said, "No, I'm sorry, that won't work that way. You're gonna be disallowed that. How long have you been taking this deduction?" And so then their people doing accounting for them tried to recalculate that and say, "Well, wait a minute. Now maybe what it is we didn't really buy these paintings. Maybe they were only lent to us by one-time use. It's actually the artists should be paying you sales tax on these paintings." Yeah, that's the way it works. So that should be the deal. Go after the artists, and the IRS didn't really buy it, and they said, "Well, okay, we have to figure this out. So what is this art in relation to Popular?" And they go, "I don't know. We have no idea. In fact, we want it out of here." And so my dad and Ralph DeSoto and the other, I'm sure Richard Lillis, the other artists that were working for Popular at that time, Cheriaka, they got calls saying, "Get the hell down here and pick up your paintings. They're way overdue. I don't know why you didn't pick them up." And it's complete fiction. But the artists were like, we're busy. Maybe we'll get them next week or something. And there was such a negative energy, actually, because the industry was collapsing and the artists had received so little money, and so little respect in a lot of ways that a lot of them just said, you know what, screw you. You didn't help me. Why should I help you? Kind of thing. And they just didn't go down. And but Dad always felt that, and he after this, I mean, he continued to work for even worse and worse and worse and worse conditions to try and make a living. But he always said that, you know, the key to success, he had a couple of keys to success, but one of them was do the very, very, very best you could possibly do, and don't even think about the money, and overdo it, and you'll just blow their minds, and they'll think in the future, you know, why should I call anyone else? I'll call Norm. And that would be at least a way to guarantee like continued employment. So these paintings that are all original pulps that I've been showing now, these are ones that Popular gave them back probably in 1953, I think. So these were the paintings that we had as a kid in our house when I was growing up. And to me, they were just a dream come true. You know, I just thought my dad was something super special. Especially this one. I always loved this one. It's just such a crazy composition. You know? I don't know, you know, I never knew like how the hell he could figure all these things out. But he had models coming in. But how would he actually get this, you know, crashed scene down at the ferry or something, ferry terminal? And but he actually would go and take a pen and pencil and draw everything obsessively. So there are drawings of the dead end sign, the stop sign, the crashed car, a close-up of the steering axle, how it works, a close-up of every single detail, the door, the handles. But I don't know still how he painted it so that they look so realistic. They all seem to exist within a kind of a form, a space and stuff. So and then you can see like her knee and her foot. It's reflected in the moisture on the sidewalk. I mean, I don't know how, because you couldn't get the model wet in a dress down on the street, you know. And so, but somehow he could just. He said like, well, he was beginning to paint, and then he would get into a trance, and he was a terrific chain smoker, and a heavy drinker. But when he would paint, was the only time ever that he would not, you know, smoke or drink. And so he would get into a painting rhythm or something, and you could go up to him and say, "Dad, it's a phone call." And it was like you're talking to Morgan Smurd. I mean, he was without Mr. Bergen around. He was just in an inanimate thing, just working. He wouldn't answer you, and he would say, "Oh, well, I have to come up for air every now and then." And so he'd get up and relax and walk around. And but for like an hour, he wouldn't smoke, talk, or anything. He would just be in a trance working. And he said that every single artist makes a whole lot of mistakes and a lot of lucky mistakes. But the difference between a good artist and a bad artist is that a good artist can see when he's made a lucky mistake and has sense enough to leave it alone. And I kind of think that, along with the idea of him being in a trance, was somehow how he was able to convey such interesting and convincing illusionism in his paintings that are really coming from his imagination, albeit with pencil sketches of the ingredients, but somehow they seem to exist as objects. Like you can see in that tire, that the white wall on the side is, again, it's reflected somehow in the moist sidewalk. But just enough to a degree that it's genuinely illusionistic.
In other words, he didn't have the lighting stuff. He just had the sketches.
Right, it's just a pencil sketch showing
lighting in his head.
Right. And so it's a kind of a phenomenal imagination, but he would just splash it out and keep splashing it out until it sort of gave us a convincing sense of believability or something. It's quite impressive, you know, if you put on a magnifying glass and look closely at like the guy's knuckles and stuff. It's a very strange, very beautiful illusionism that he creates. It's obviously splashed on like a, you know, my father obviously loved John Singer Sargent a tremendous amount, and Joseph Christian Landecker, and those two guys between them really created a kind of it really looks like the famous Franz Hals, basically, Netherlands. And it's a particular type of painting that those three names together are just, they define the kind of painting that's spectacular. And my dad is just definitely painting along using the way in which they manipulate paint. That's his actual hand. This one you never see. It's cropped on the cover of the. Is it Detective Tales, I think? And there's a guy with a knife reflected in her green sunglasses. He's a very ghoulish, mean guy, but when you just see her tight face on the cover, it's really incredible to see this beautiful, big composition of a big naked girl with a red background.
And a great cleavage.
Yeah. But I guess they were afraid you wouldn't catch the eyeballs of the little guy in there, so they cropped it in real close so that you can actually see on the cover of the paper. And these are the more eerie ones I put in also.
I don't feel a pulse.
Yeah.
Now, would he perform it by himself?
Yeah. No, he always came up with it himself, and they're very strange. But it's like this. For this one, I've seen the sketches. You know, and he was looking at the steam shovel. He drew it from like 5 different positions, and thinking like, what's going on? What's kind of interesting or something? And one of the sketches shows it exactly from this position, but he's just developing ideas and bringing them in. Every different publisher, every different art director, and every different artist all have their own bizarre creative relationships together, interpersonal. But my dad's attitude, again, one of his keys to success was that don't ever let them pigeonhole you, if you would say. And so the important thing is to paint in your own way, like yourself, and to develop a style that's recognizable of your own style. And then it'll be a Norm Saunders as opposed to, oh, that guy who paints fish really well or something. So he was in dread of ever being only known for one thing, because then you can only be hired for that. And I said, we don't need any more fish paintings, so thanks a lot, pal. So he tried to develop a special style. And the more I look at him in comparison to other painters, I can see that it's really, truly, if you to maybe exaggerate it to bring it across, it's like he's a cartoonist even more than a painter, because his drawing skills are incredible, and he has a very strong style of drawing that's all his own. But the things he's able to squeeze into spaces, and so we've got the little villain in the corner. We've got the guy taking a big kind of an L shape in the middle of the whole canvas. These are like very powerful, almost cartoon-like compositions that aren't very realistic, actually. If you put real models in those positions, it would look a little different. And if you think of Earl Berge or Rudy Bolarski, that these people really look like they're people who've been photographed. They really look like they're a human in a photograph. And my father's saying he used models all the time, and he would photograph models too, but these look like a cartoon of a person more than giving you the impression that that's an actual photo of a man standing there. So that kind of distortion allowed him to basically, if you think about it, like a lot of artists want to have a flamboyant signature when they sign their painting or something, and so you really need to find out what is your signature when you're drawing naturally. And you know, every human being has a signature, oddly enough, which is identifiable by a signature analyst for the FBI or something. And Dad developed a signature style of drawing, and so his compositions are kind of make-believe, basically, but he uses actual models and looks at them. I can't figure out why everyone thinks skeletons would stick together. I never could get that. Gristle on the outside, so they stood there. So the guy's fingers are all okay. It's weird.
That's like gristle.
This is an actual breathing apparatus. And this, again, harkens back to Dad's formative years with modern mechanics, where everything was like building an actual machine. And so in 1950, this was an effective and serious form of underwater breathing apparatus. But now it just looks like some Martian bell jar or something. That's really weird. This skeleton is held together too for some reason. He's got a wedding knife head. Yeah, the knife is dripping in blood.
Would he be signing these, or?
Yeah, he always was happy to sign everything.
And they couldn't?
They would sometimes crop it out, but not intentionally or anything. But he would also not sign a tremendous amount of stuff. But at this point, there was no longer the competition between like the 4 or 5 different big publishers that he might have been working for before the war. So there really wasn't an issue about signing them for him.
I think you illustrate the actual source. It's something that has some sort of consultation.
Yeah, these were these were famous Fantastic Mysteries, and they were from specific stories. And the other ones, he would just bring in oddball stuff that was related to the theme, and they were very happy to get it. And there was almost never, any question that they necessarily relate to in the story. But I think for the science fiction ones, they were, I think, specific, I believe. When Dad pulled out this painting when I was a kid, this is the first time in my life that I thought, oh, wow, I think my father was a genius. And wow, I mean, look at that painting. And for somehow this was the one that convinced me as a kid that my father wasn't just that weird big guy, but that he really was special somehow. And a funny thing happened was the guys at a big collector of science fiction pulps was a graphic artist guy in New York called Woody Gelman, and he finally got hired by a bubblegum company that said, can you come up with some good ideas for us because we're making these baseball cards, can you make a little book of work that would make some more money on these, get kids interested? So he was kind of like an idea guy, doing stuff for Topps Bubblegum, and he loved this painting and loved my father's work, and was a fan of my dad's in a sense. And he asked some other guys that he had working for Topps if they would could get in touch with Norman Saunders and stuff. And so he started working for Topps Pulpcon company because of that painting. I always thought that was kind of cool. The day later on made Mars Attacks and all that stuff. And it's kind of because of that painting. This is a very, very late, 58 Western romances. And this is the photograph my father used of him and my mom. And I'm down there on his foot. Oh. So that's me at 4 years old. And I might have made it into to this pulp. So this is the closest I personally get to being in a pulp. There's a little boy down in the corner inside of the Pioneers, where they're getting off of the. This is like the mail order bride that shows up on the scene.
Were you cropped out?
Was that what?
Were you cropped out?
I think you can see little kids in there. But I was basically, when they were both posing like this, nobody could babysit, so I was wandering into the actual photographs.
He was like, please, let me in.
Yeah, so it was fun, and I actually did pose for my dad a lot. Everybody was, even all our neighbors had to pose for him and stuff, but that's my claim to fame right there. When the pulps were really on, Dad thought, well, okay, Walter Baumhofer and Tommy Lovell were both making Western art. And, during those years of my childhood, my formative years, the guys were all coming over to our house and trying to game plan what the hell they're going to do to readjust to this terrifying world of, poverty, basically, and obsolescence is that the word. They were no longer in demand at all. And so everyone had their own idea. Like Ray Kinsler, who had been, pen and ink guy, was saying, "Oh, we got to start doing portraits," and Tommy Lovell was like, "I think we should do Western art, like really good stuff." So Dad started making Western art at the time, also to see if he could, and these were like, they would take them to Kennedy Gallery in New York, and they were trying their best, to find some way to make a living. But Ray, this is what I was talking about. From that, we were talking about that Art of the West thing. And this is what they did, and all of them were thinking that. And Cheriaka did this. He made a very good living at it as a fine artist doing Western art. But one of the other publishers, Martin Goodman, and I forget the guy that did Liberty. Who did Liberty, John? McFadden, right. They both put out good men's magazines, and so Dad got jobs doing those, and that was okay. But he was hoping for something lucrative, So again, these were like $150. So, and again, I'm posing in this one. I'm the guard to the far left. So this is like, I think, 1966 or something. So I'm 11 or 12 years old, and I'm holding them. It was just fun, to be posing for my dad. So these were the men's magazine covers. So these are the men's magazine's interiors. And he really put a lot of effort into these. And in a sense, they're some of his greatest masterpieces because he really was very, very talented and had a lot of experience in the 60s and was doing these. And so this is his Mars Attacks cards, which at the time, again, he was just getting $1.25 an hour to do them. They sold for about, I think, only about 2 or 3 months. And then they were off of the counters. So at the time it wasn't so earth-shattering or something, but he continued to work with Topps, and this is a Topps Gold on set he did for Batman, and that was a very popular TV show. And at this point, instead of just doing extra little weird things for the sports bubble gum, they began to realize at Topps that they could maybe make just non-sports cards. And so it began a kind of experiment for about 10 years. They kept making different non-sport cards. And at the end of it, they were making Wacky Packs, which was a very popular set. And I think they made 18 sets that my father worked for, about 44 images in each set from 1967 to 1979. And so this was some of the last work that he did was these Wacky Packs for Topps Pulpcon. This is the last assignment he ever had. Some really nice guy, I guess Jeffrey O'Brien, I don't remember, but Dad thought he was really nice. And he called him up and said, I want you to maybe do some kind of recreation or something. And Dad said, no, I got no idea. This is really good. And so I think this is 1980. This was done. I think my dad would be only 73 or something at that point. But it's the last published piece he ever made. Then basically Dad, around that same time, 1980, he was contacted by Daniel Gobbett and Al Tonic and John Gunson, and you guys all know who you are. And they were saying, well, we're interested in this stuff called pulp, and we wonder if you'd come out to our Pulpcon. And it was absolutely like one of those rejuvenation things for him because, he really was just, we were very, very poor, and he had spent basically from coming back from the war up until like 1980 when Pulpcon adopted him on a steady decline, even though his talent and his creativity and his mental capacities were great. But the society itself really didn't have any need for his type of work. It had become very unpopular. I think one of the milestones for me, it was so shocking to find out, was in 1964, a Saturday Evening Post fired Norman Rockwell. And just said, go to hell. And Norman Rockwell had nothing, to live for, sort of without the Saturday Evening Post. And then in the next few years, I think they went bankrupt, and the new people that bought them up and started it again with a smaller circulation hired him back. And so he did then later make more. But basically, the 64 on, it was just a really, Dad would say it was like I had a business making buggy whips and they invented the automobile. It was just that obsolete what he did. And so he'd always said, well, my whole life's work sold for a nickel at newsstands, and then people just threw it out, and now it's all gone. It'll never, ever, ever be found again. It's completely, all my life's work is gone. And then suddenly, you guys adopted him and brought him out and to Pulpcon, and it was an incredible experience for him. It was, as an artist, he just never met the public. He never interacted with anyone other than an art director. And, he never taught publicly or anything. So it was a very much a, kind of like the classical idea of an artist in a garret somewhere just working. And here there was a room full of kind, interested people, and it just blew him away. It was really absolutely the most meaningful thing to redeem his life's work for him. And I had become, before that point, kind of devoted to trying to catalog his work and not accept the idea that his work could never be documented, that it was all just wasted. So I began, I actually happened to travel around a lot of the country, and so I would go to any town I was ever in, go to the bookstores and buy the pulps. And anything I could find, God forbid it wasn't by him, I would make a mistake because he would be so disappointed and say, you think I paint like, Larski, and I said, oh, Dad, I just got that, for myself, yeah. And so I really couldn't make a mistake. And but I had collected a couple of hundred here and there and stuff. But I never felt, that it was really being treated with the kind of respect that I was hoping. And then this wonderful guy, P.H. Schrader's, who wrote Paperback USA, interviewed my dad and wrote an article for Dan Zimmer for Illustration Magazine. And he called me up and said, they don't pay anything at all, but it's a hell of a magazine. They just did the first issue, and I really think they should do something on your dad. He's ready to do it, and he'll print it and make it look good. If you can, it would be great if you could do something on your dad. So I couldn't, I'm always trying to hope that things are going to turn out all right, but you never know. But I did this article for him, and I couldn't believe it. It came right out, and it was out in circulation, and he sent out, 2,000 copies, and everybody gobbled them up. And so it was really like, for me, a whole new idea that the fandom thing has become just spectacular in my mind. And then afterwards, Dan asked me, well, we don't know about lots of the pulp artists, and the information in most of the stuff is pretty inaccurate. Who else did you know and stuff? So I did one on Ralph DeSoto, and it was fun to be able to, tell everybody what DeSoto was like. And so then I just continued doing them, and this one's on J.W. Scott. And again, just it was great to find out about these guys. In this case, it was very unusual that his widow is still alive, and but absolutely refused to talk to me or acknowledge that he did anything other than just really nice Western art. So he's one of those guys that made the transition and made a good career as a Western artist, and but just refute that they're and completely ignore their pulp heritage. So they were, it's great to be able to give people credit where credit is due in my mind. One of the things I've always loved was all of these crazy, violent, sexual things that J.W. Scott did that are just classics. Everyone looks at it and goes, "Oh my God, that's so wild." But it bugged me that nobody knew what W stood for, or they mixed him up with H.W. Scott. Right. And so I just thought, well, I've got to find out who this guy is and catalog the whole thing. Definitely my favorite of all the other pulp artists was Alan Anderson as a person. And this is the issue that just came out. It's just great to really to give him the due that I always wanted to be able to give him. This is a photo that didn't make it into the magazine. I think with the help of Steve Kennedy and stuff, we were able to put together incredible hundreds and hundreds of photographs. But I just thought this was one of the cutest ones. And that's exactly how I remember him coming over to our house and stuff when I was a kid. This is a funny guy. Just it was a model. He'd worked for my dad and Cheriaka and a lot of people, and it was just great to run into him and get his view of it. And most people just, would never think about the modeling side of being in a pulp. That he was actually a star of so many different pulp magazines. It's just bizarre. I don't know if anyone's seen the article, but the two characters, this is by DeSoto. The one reading the Saturday Evening Post is Richard Willis. And the other one is Larry Meyer, who was this really kind of pretty good actor model. And it's just a funny medley of all the different artists, Baumhofer, DeSoto, my father, and Cheriaka, all hamming it up for their different action adventure movies. And it's fun to do the article. I did one on Cheriaka too. It's just great. And I thought I would show you, just as in closing, one of my paintings. So this is the kind of work I do. And I can tell you, if you had me on a psychoanalyst couch, that yes, I'm influenced by my dad, but I don't know if you can see it at all. But this is my type of art that I do. And this is a painting I just did of the Wolfman. It's a tombstone of the Wolfman. And these are what I also do to make money. This is a sculpture I make. It's a giant fish floating on the water. And this is another one, I think, is at the airport in LaGuardia. And so these are like drawing sculptures that I make. And that is the end of that.
I think sometimes you have to have a little critical. I only question the Norman Rockwell thing. I think he should have probably been fired from day one. These people, these giants that you're talking about, like your father, they have a cutting edge. Mm-hmm. They're not jingoistic, sugar diabetic people like Rockwell, and they're not posers like Bob King. He never did a real thing in his life. But you know what I'm saying? But they did different things. They wrote with the times, and Rockwell was always rolling in money.
One thing I think is interesting,
but I don't include Rockwell with these people. I think he was a terrible influence on just about everybody.
One of the things that's kind of weird is that I haven't seen the actual numbers, but I have seen them, but I don't have them registered in my brain. But the size of the circulation of Saturday Evening Post was so large, so tremendously large, that in a sense, doing a horror pulp cover compared to doing a Saturday Evening Post cover, in terms of the audience that you're addressing, one is definitely a niche audience, the other one is actual American ambition to have something called mass media. It was just dawning on people, like, what is a huge mass media? Everyone in America, every home gets this. And so a lot of the thing that you're responding to, that we say is like, it has a cutting edge on the pulse, but no cutting edge. It's actually, I can understand why.
Remember when they say 90% of everything is crap? Well, Rockwell was the whole 90%.
They say that. Already. The only thing that I wrote and agreed on was mediocrity.
He was the definition of it.
But my dad said that in 1913, the only person he'd ever seen, I think it was 13, who was named Norman in the world was Norman Rockwell. And he always thought, well, I can do it if Norman Rockwell. So my father was actually friends with Norman Rockwell and, looked up to him. But basically everybody looked up to Joseph Christian. Yeah, everyone liked him.
Dad deserved to make it out. Be a billionaire.
Here's another interesting thing that is a point that's unusual. When you work for Saturday Evening Post, you would get an annual contract. And I think the annual contract was, for each cover you would do, depending on what decade we're talking about, you'd get $5,000 for the cover. And it's an annual contract that includes, like, whatever that would be for that year, 24 covers or something they might do. So much money. These guys were getting $60, $75 for a pulp cover. The concept of getting that much money, you can't blame it. There's definitely a carrot out there, and they're definitely aiming for it.
When Mark attacked this person, did he ever contact the state?
Yeah. He asked if Mars Attacks people ever contact. Tim Burton loves my father and contacted us and asked us to come to the premiere for the film and stuff. Using your mic inside. But I was shocked that they don't mention my father's name anywhere. And Tim Burton mentions it in every breath he ever says when he talks to us about it. But I guess it's a bullshit thing that they mention it.
We have to pay.
And like, or Topps, wants to retain complete utter ownership or whatever. So they were probably dreaming about merchandising or something. But in any case, it pisses me off that, again, the guy got $1.25 an hour to do it. But he inspired everybody, and they made this film in 1997, and they wouldn't put his damn name.
Do you take any rights to any of his image?
Oh, yeah, sure. I've retained complete right control over everything, and I'm ready to invade Poland.
So his works. How did that work? When they gave
I'm afraid to talk to you about this subject.
When they gave back his paintings, when suits are also giving back the rights to it.
I can only speak from ignorance, and with new precedent in the room, I dare not speak anything about it. We have one of the greatest copyright lawyers in the world. But basically, I like the idea that something called intellectual property belongs to the person that creates it. And I love that. So simple, it's easy to understand. And my father's work was signed, and it's Norman Saunders and stuff. So it's always Norman Saunders.
You mentioned about popular saying, this is really, you own this, and we just sort of leased it from you. So that should allow you to, well, you own it.
I don't know. They're all just penny pinchers, and I don't care about it. I just want. We were going from a guy that was like weeping because no one on the planet Earth heard who he was, in 1980, to now trying to argue. I wonder if I should get a share of this money. So I'm just glad that it's out there.
It's current now. It's part of the culture.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. Art Spiegelman was hired to work for Topps. He's the guy that did Raw and I guess works as a comic editor for the New Yorker now or something. He told Dad, he was only 17 years old. It was like in 1967, I think. Gee, Mr. Saunders, I know all about you. You're legendary. And Dad just burst into tears. He'd never heard the concept of such a thing. And he came home and said, it's amazing. I actually have a following. This is guy that has heard of me.
Pulps of one.
I should probably.
In his work he did when he was in China, he actually,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
in his work he did in China,
China.
did he actually do anything regarding the flying tigers? Any
Flying Tiger, yeah. Well, they were flying out of an air. Takayaki Airport or something like that. It was like they taken it over from the Japanese and they were using it as a Flying Tiger base. And he was there and illustrated those scenes. You know, well, he saw, but he was just doing sort of reportage, I guess it would be called, or something like that. Yeah. But they were very, very, very important. You know, in that theater to everybody. You know, with Merrill's Marauders also.
Do you ever do any decorating like nose cone art?
I can't hear you.
Do you ever do any decorating like nose cone art or any of that?
What kind of art? Nose cones. Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. I was surprised to see that. Yeah, he did. The 1381st Corps of Petroleum Storage Supply of the Army Corps of Engineers to this day has a patch that my father made. This is weird. I gotta cut it off. That's it. Thanks for your questions.
You've been listening to a Pulp Event podcast, brought to you by the Pulp Net. When your next adventure was just a dime away. Please visit us online at thepulp.net. Thank you for listening, and keep reading the pulps.